think I'm gonna take these glasses off. Hello, my name is Jamal Williams, aka Codemaster Jamal, and I'm an up-and-coming indie game developer. This video today is about an update to my game, as well as what I've been up to personally, as well as an introduction to my channel. Today, I'm going to be discussing about why I haven't been posting videos recently. I was keeping a steady workflow until I came across kind of a hurdle. I ended up going to the hospital because I had this kind of like problem. I was told that it was an acute carpal tunnel syndrome. I ended up getting it checked out and they said it wasn't that big of a deal, but like every time I type on the computer, my hands start to swell up and hurt. So now I know I have to take a few hours from doing that, which is what's slowed me down. Before I start speaking about my game, I'd like to let you know about who I am and more importantly why I call myself Codemaster Jamal. For the most part, I started off learning about video games when I was 14. Really, I've always kind of had like a fascination with video games in general. Ever since I was 6 years old, I used to play Pokemon, and looking at the character sprites move across the screen, I was like, oh, how did they get this little drawing thing of a jig to kind of move across it? Playing the Game Boy for me was like an etchy sketch, but like it was like animated. I've always kind of had that joy or that type of curiosity from wanting to understand and explore things since I was a very young child. So I think that's actually what drove me to get into game development. It was actually really hard at first because I didn't really have like a lot of encouragement. But anyhow, I started off developing games on a platform called Beyond. Ahead of time, I was kind of learning C++ because they have their own language called DM. That's also where I got to practice my pixel art skills, which I developed over time. I also have experience with role-playing forums and stuff like that. I led a pretty huge community back in the day when those type of things were popular across the internet. As a 27-year-old living in South Florida, I support myself by doing freelance web design as well as working Uber and Postmates on the side. My goal is to eventually one day be able to live off of my creativity. I've always been a big fan of not just video games but animation. I'm also very big into art. I draw a lot. I've actually had this YouTube channel like March 6th or March 26th, 2006. So that's how big of a fossil I am on the internet, I guess. Carbon dating on the internet. So as the story moves on with my life in general, I ended up graduating high school. I was like really into music. I started playing like in a rock band. I was like a metal bassist and that type of thing. That's actually why I originally started YouTube. I went through being a musician in South Florida and it was hard. It was struggling like any other musician. I basically needed some money, so I ended up working in a restaurant, which is not that big of a deal, but I ended up like really liking it. I got into that and I ended up being like a cook for about 5 years. I ended up actually putting down like my instruments, picking up a pair of tongs or like chef knives, and ended up working in a couple of different restaurants across Miami, and I really liked it. I even started like going to school for it at one point, but then every time I would go to work, I would always have these ideas for like video games, and it wasn't just video games. And in some instances, I couldn't decide if I wanted it to be like a video game or a comic book or like an animation. I couldn't decide like what it was. I just had like an idea in my head and I had to get it out. And I remember having a counselor in the 10th grade. I went to this summer camp. It was like a summer program called Upward Bound. It's basically a program where they take a bunch of kids from high school and they put them in college dorm rooms over the summer. So I basically had this counselor tell me that if you ever have a good idea, to write it down in a book. And I started writing down all my ideas. Over time, I realized that I just had multiple ideas. I had an idea for like a card game, an idea for a comic book, an idea for a video game. I have multiple ideas for video games. I just got to the point where like, what am I doing with my life really? Like, am I like really happy doing what I'm doing? Yeah, it's paying my bills, I'm getting by. I'm not really like happy as a person. I don't even know how to explain it, but like I really wasn't there entirely. It just, before I knew it, just came to me that, maybe there's something else I should be doing with my life. Now, the purpose of my channel is to hopefully gain an audience, or at least look for the type of community that I've been looking for. I've been going hard on Instagram for like a while. I built up my following up a little bit on Instagram, but I needed something that would perhaps push it to the next level. So I sought out YouTube because I realized that you can grow a bigger audience on YouTube than you can with Instagram. First thing I offer for my channel would be game development videos, game development logs, as well as showing like tips and tricks about how I obtain certain things without my game, certain effects and stuff like that. And also hopefully some tips that help other people develop their game. I also have some tricks when it comes to music. When it comes to me, I'm both self-taught as well as formally instructed. So like I learned how to do something on my own and then went out into the world and found many different masters and things. And then I ended up going to church, meeting bass players there. I ended up going to school, meeting bass players there, going to different concerts, meeting bass players there. And I just surrounded myself around a lot of musicians and I acquired knowledge over time. So I also seek to offer music theory, teach music theory if I can. I know the very basics of it when it comes to dictating music. So I wish to seek to basically share my knowledge, teach everything I know, or teach at least what I do know. Another reason why I created my channel was for the purpose of like web development, like sharing like my computer science projects. I also like to film a lot of things in South Florida, just like the scenery here, because I really do think that South Florida is a very, very beautiful state. A lot of people obviously come here to retire. It's also probably the #1 vacation place in the country. South Florida is a very, very beautiful place. I love living here. I would also like to take the time to kind of appreciate nature and those type of things. Now let's talk about game development. For this one, I'm going to put on my smart people glasses again. Okay, let's do it. When I first started learning Unity, I wasn't trying to make a game in particular. I didn't even have like the idea for a game. At one point, I was just learning tutorials because I had took a intro to Java development course at Miami-Dade College. And I also took an intro to C++ course as well. I took C++ first. So even though I was in C++, I was looking at a lot of things and I was just like, oh wow, you know, you can use this in the game. So I ended up just looking up like a lot of tutorials. I learned how to make Snake and a few other games, but I ended up losing the files as well as all the projects that I did in class that year, including my final exam project. It was just something that was printed on the console. It was nothing too special. I ended up taking a liking to Java programming language. I really fell in love with it. I think it's the most beautiful language ever. It's like very versatile and I just really love it. I had looked at C# and like Unity before I went to school. I would say I started off learning about Unity back in 2010 or 2011. It wasn't up until about last year that I started to take it serious. So I actually did a little bit of 3D modeling back in 2010 and 2011, but I had a hard time with it, which is why I didn't like entirely pursue it. That's why I ended up doing 3D, but then like it was like, oh, this is really difficult for me, so I ended up going back to 2D pixel art because it was just easier for me to do. Because at the time it was just like it was taking too long to produce one mesh, and you know I was just getting like really frustrated. But back to the topic, my game. I do have a name planned for it, but I won't reveal anything. If you've been watching my Instagram live, it has been revealed on there. I won't say much about it. Kind of a secretive person. I like to surprise people. In that fashion, I do keep secrets. When it comes to my game, I basically went ham for about 3 months studying Blender and Unity. I had finally finished a couple of Java game tutorials on the internet. I figured, you know, like why not take it to the next step? I have been doing this type of thing for like a hobby for a long time. So like by that point, I was like, you know what, I'm ready for this. I can do this. I ended up stepping up to Unity, doing like a couple of Blender tutorials. I really learned how to 3D model, doing texture painting and that type of thing. That's stuff that was very tedious for me. I didn't have like the right amount of focus, like drive for it. I think being self-taught versus going to a university and learning, the real difference is in a university, you're taught how to think like a programmer, which is what really opened up my mind and allow thoughts to flow a little bit smoother. Now it's like when I attempt to do something now, I look to problem solve a lot of things. I don't even just use it in like programming. Okay, I understand the problem. There are multiple solutions, but how do we get to the best solution? I kind of take that type of approach to everything. When something breaks, you try to understand why it broke before you try to figure out how to fix it. I just learned like a different thought process when I was in school, and that's what helped me get past a lot of hurdles I had before when it came to Unity, like learning Blender. Like my first 3D model ended up taking me like 3 hours to do, and I couldn't believe that. Wow, 3 hours to do one model. Now imagine making thousands of them. It's gonna take me 3,000 hours. I don't have that much time for one game, and you know, I see why it takes multiple people to do this. And I tried looking for help, honestly, but like none of my friends wanted to like game develop, or at least try to learn game developing with me. I didn't know anybody at school. I think the difference between the industry now versus back in 2010 was that like at that time there were only 3 schools in the entire country, probably a little bit more than that offered game development. And for the most part, I did not have the money to go to either one of those. And the way how my parents were was like, okay, we don't mind paying for your schooling, but like, can you promise us to have a job afterwards? And you know, at the time of 18, 19 years old, I tried to get a job, but like, I couldn't promise them like, oh, for sure, I want to have a job, because I wasn't entirely too sure about it myself at the age of 18. Nobody's sure about anything at the age of 18. That was my mindset about it. Nowadays, like, it's on every campus. It's being offered at a lot of schools. As for like Unity and Blender, at the point where I can say that I'm confident in my skills as like a Blender artist. I'm not so confident with Unity. Unity, I still have a bit more learning to do. With Unity, I need like another 3 to 4 months to really get used to the software. I guess because the C# language is very similar to Java, that I just kind of really quickly adapted to it. That being said, I still have a few concepts I need to learn when it comes to Unity. Next, I'd like to talk to you about funding. Now, as a game developer, but also a consumer of video games, as a kid, I never really had like a lot of money. Not to say I was necessarily like poor or anything like that. I didn't really get like, a lot of presents. I was grateful for the presents I did get. So like, I'm not like grouchy because like, I didn't get certain things as a kid. But the point that I'm trying to make is that I don't plan on like making games where like people will have to fork over like, an arm and a leg just to play them. As for my game, I plan on funding the game myself, which is crazy to a lot of people. What I mean by that, I mean I'll be working Uber, Postmates, paying my bills, working on the game in my free time. As for crowdfunding, I'm not really a big fan of crowdfunding, because what I've learned about that is that if you set your goal too low and you go over that goal, that money would basically go to like GoFundMe or like Patreon or whatever, instead of like to you or something like that. And then on top of that, they'll also take their transaction fees. But then if you aim too high and you don't make it, basically it'll go straight to the fundraiser and like you won't see like a penny of it. So I decided that even though it might be harder for me, I'm going to fund this game myself. If I do offer donations, I'll have like some type of reward for a donation, where if you donate $50, you're basically paying for the game itself. If you donate like $100, you get the game and like a t-shirt or something like that, you know what I mean, where like you get something back. So it's not just like, okay, you're giving your money to a stranger. Okay, you're giving your money to a stranger and at least you're getting something back in return. That's how I want to handle kind of like funding for my game. Now I want to move on to monetization. I mentioned earlier that I don't want this game costing people like an arm and a leg. I won't be doing like monthly subscriptions. I think when it comes to the game, I prefer people pay like a one-time payment fee. That's pretty much it. Like, I don't plan on there being like in-app purchases, like running ads or something like that, because I feel like that kind of takes away from the game. Because I'm not just a developer, I'm a consumer. My thing that I've always kind of hated about games is that a lot of major big companies is that they're just trying to get as much money as they possibly can out of you. I think like a one-time fee for the game is probably the best way to go. If I were to add in-app purchases, it would be for something like additional save slots, nothing that'll give like one player an edge over the other. Finally, a Q&A. Some questions about my game. Let's go ahead and answer them. Okay, the first question, is this game a first-person game? Right now, my test environment is a first-person game because I'm still learning the Unity software. So right now, yes, a first-person game. But for my commercial release of my game, it won't be a first-person game. It'll actually be like a third-person camera, be more of like a walk-around adventure type of game. That actually brings me to my second question, is this an open world game? Yes, this is an open world game. I plan on making a pretty huge game on top of that. So I do plan on having a character model in which you can walk around the world, adventure around that way. So the next question is my game a Pokemon game? No, it's not. It has nothing to do with Pokemon. I will say this, that if I decide to go through with this, it will be a monster themed game. It'll be a monster RPG. Yes, it's Pokemon. But the point is that I don't want a game that kind of mirrors Pokemon and its system. So if I do make it a monster game, like, I don't want the exact same system as Pokemon. So I plan on making like a change to the whole monster genre. So that way you don't just get another clone of another game. And finally, is this game an MMO? I saved this question for last because if you search up on the internet how to make an MMO, most people for your first game will tell you you're nuts, you're crazy, you're gonna waste your time, it is not worth it, and you shouldn't do it. Now, right off the bat, I've always wanted to do an MMO. And in fact, that's kind of why I got into games in the first place. Like, MMOs are actually like the type of games that I really like the most. So it's always been my dream to actually make an MMO. And how can I not make my dream game an MMO? Yes, it's going to be an MMO. At least I'm going to try. I have the confidence to say that now. But the difference between Unity in 2010 and Unity in 2018, or at least game developing in general, is that there's been a lot more tutorials, there's been a lot more research. Put it this way, even within Unity, there's multiple different ways to actually make an MMO. It's a lot easier to create a client system now than it was 7 years ago. So for that purpose, I would like to attempt to make this game MMO. I know that making the client server is one thing, and then creating features where players can trade and PvP and stuff like that is like a completely different ball game. So I understand that difficulty in that aspect, but for the most part, it's I do see it as being something within my grasp. So for that aspect, yes, I want it to be an MMO, but I won't promise of it being an MMO. I would just like to say, if you've reached this far, thank you for watching, and I really appreciate your support. I really appreciate it also if you would give me a like, thumbs up, and if you could share this video and subscribe as well. I greatly appreciate that as well. So anyhow, thanks for watching. My name is Codemaster Jamal, and I'm signing out.